Awesome. Thank you, Hunter, so much for having me. I appreciate it. Hello, Power to Fly and all audience members. I hope you are well, staying warm during this winter. And I'm really excited to bring this talk to you all today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I will pass it over to you for this next chat. Thank you so much for making the time.
Absolutely, for sure. Oh, I just had nothing better to do, so I just like popped into this summit.
I love that you just did a hair flip.
I know, no, like you gotta make do. Like people think that hijab limits you, they limit your possibility, but no, with, you know, true liberation of women, you too, even with a piece of fabric, can do a hair flip without hair. Okay, awesome. So let me share screen. Can you all see okay?
Yep, we can see it great.
Perfect. Let me present. Wonderful. Those darn bars. Okay, put it over to the corner. Wonderful. Are we good? Hunter, you can see okay?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you all so much for having me again. We are going to be talking about intersectional DEI and religion. Just a little bit about me. My name is Rahime Ramazani. I use she, her pronouns. As Hunter so kindly introduced to me, all of the things. So I'll just go skip with that. Our quick agenda for our short time together today is we're going to first set the foundation with a refresher on intersectionality and DEI. I know a lot of the times for those of us who go to DEI professional development workshops and trainings a lot, it can be a little bit of a time investment to learn the DEI definitions again, but it really does set a good foundation, especially also for those who are newer to the field or getting to know this field's work overall. So very important, and wanting to set it in the context of religious identity, what religion in DEI is and what is not. So setting boundaries, because there are a lot of misconceptions from a lot of different angles about what advocating for religious inclusion within DEI work is. And I definitely want to make sure that we clarify that, how religious cultural competency versus cultural humility plays into it, letting people tell you what they need, and then we'll recap. So yeah, let's keep going. Refresher on intersectionality and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So some of you all might have seen this diagram before. And as we know from the great scholar, Kimberly Crenshaw, who is the original founder of the idea of intersectionality, intersectionality is a lens through which we see where power comes and collides. And I love this diagram where it shows the interconnected nature of all of these different parts of identity, including race, ethnicity, gender identity, class, language, religion, right, was what we're talking about today, ability, sexuality, mental health, age, education, body size, and so many more that are also very valid and need to be addressed and learned about so that we can have an even more complex intersectional approach to all of these issues that come out in the workplace. If you're at a university, if you run a community organization, whatever your context is, these are going to play out in all of these different settings and are the foundation of truly effective diversity, equity, and inclusion work. For example, we are in Women's History Month in the United States. And as we know, even though there are a lot of conversations around the gender pay gap or hiring or discrimination against women for various different reasons, we know that the experience of a white woman versus a Black woman versus a Latinx woman versus a Muslim woman, though that is not a racial ethnic identity, that's a religious identity, all of those different people are going to have unique experiences that if we don't look at their different intersectional identities, if you have a Black woman who is disabled, even more so, that's going to be a very specific, unique experience that absolutely needs to be addressed intersectionally. So before we get into the definitions again of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I want to ask you, think through, as you hear me read these definitions, think in your mind, center it on specifically how this can apply to someone's religious identity in your organization. And also if you yourself are a member of a marginalized religious community in your region, because of course it is going to be region specific. For instance, obviously you can see that I'm Muslim and I'm in the United States. I'm Muslim American. I'm born and raised in the United States. This is very much my context. I'm currently in the San Francisco Bay Area. This is my context. However, if I were in a Muslim majority country or a country that uses the religion of Islam as part of like their government system, that's going to be a completely different context and a different conversation, right? So needing to be very clear about the region in the same way, if we're talking in the United States around Hindus and the experience of Hindu Americans, that's going to be incredibly different in the United States context compared to if we were in India, right? So region is very, very important to keep in mind, especially also as diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts move, as over time try and move global, right? We need to make sure that we are not taking a template that is formed, nurtured, theorized in the United States or the West context overall, and that just painting that like, oh, this just applies to the whole rest of the world with no qualifiers or differences for regional histories, socioeconomic statuses, politics, and on and on. So getting back to my slides, if you yourself are a member of a marginalized religious community in the region that you are living in, how do these ideas, I want you to think through that lens, how do these ideas how can they be meaningfully applied to you in the workplace and your experience as a member of a marginalized religious community? Okay, so for our refresher, diversity, when people of different identities, both visible and invisible, are present in a space, okay? Think about that as it relates to religious identity. Again, obviously for me as a Muslim, I wear hijab. Not all Muslim women wear hijab. That is not at all what I'm saying. But for those of us who do, there are also many other religious identities that come with visible signs that they are a member of that religious community. Sikhs will wear turbans if they so choose. Hindus might have a bindi, or forgive me if there's any Hindus in the audience. I'm still learning to be respectful of, but my understanding is that it's Hindus, I think women, but sometimes men as well, will wear and would like to wear that as a part of their workplace. And they should, if they so wish to. There are Jews who will wear a kippah, and on and on and on. Other different, how does that show up visibly in the workplace and also invisible identities? Inclusion, when all of these diverse people feel that their presence and voice matter in the space, that they are socially accepted and welcome amongst the other members, and that they have power to affect change. So there's a bunch of different points in there. Sit with that as it might apply to religious identity. Again, keeping in mind, of course, in DEI, we're looking at those with marginalized identities who are facing microaggressions or outright discrimination because of their identity, not necessarily those who already are privileged in a space, right? And then inequity, when diverse members of this space have equal access to all opportunities through accommodations and or the removal of barriers that exist based on that person's identities. I'm sure a lot of us have seen this picture. I really, really love this diagram as it is so succinct and to the point, just very easy to understand. The whole idea, again, thinking through the lens of religious inclusion, religious identity of your employees, of your staff at the university, your college students, the people in your community, whatever your organizational context is, the difference between equality, where we give everyone the same resources, we give everyone the same one-size-fits-all situation and expect them to thrive, when inherently we understand in DEI that people inherently are different, right? And that is not automatically a bad thing. It actually is a very beautiful and positive thing. And there's, of course, the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, where we see that there's so much that organizations can benefit from having diverse staff members, clients, customers, and so on, who then are included and are treated equitably, as we see on the bottom row, these different people who have different needs to be able to access the same opportunity of using a bike needed different bikes. They can't just be given the same thing and expected to have equitable access to this opportunity. So in summary, the goal of diversity, equity, and inclusion is to recognize our differences. Think of this through religious inclusion, see them as a value add, and to provide for our needs in a way that honors those differences rather than ignoring them or attempting to erase them. So I would love to invite you all in the comments, or if you prefer to keep it to yourself, not a problem at all. What came up for you when hearing these different terms that most of us are probably very familiar with, but in relation to religious identity? Hunter, may I ask, am I able to see the chat from attendees or no?
Yes, we can, our moderators can pull it from the chat and they will put it into our Zoom chat here.
Okay, I will give it maybe like another 10 seconds. If anyone has anything to share, I would be very interested to hear anyone share what came up for them, whether, again, they are someone from any particular religious background and thinking about their own situation, or maybe they have a friend or a family member or a colleague, and so on, someone that they are in community with, who they can see that how this is applied to them differently, as DEI usually discusses more race, gender, sexual orientation, which as it should, and also religious identity. Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, hopefully you all are thinking to yourself, reflecting on this. I will trust that you all are doing so. Wonderful. So what is religion in DEI and what is it not? What it is that, as is always the case when reaching out to a new marker of identity in diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, we must start with inclusion and equity, and diversity, if it's not already in existence, will naturally follow. Because for those of us who are from different marginalized communities, we are on the outlook always of environments that embrace our identities and who we can, in places where we can be our authentic self, to the extent that we wish to disclose in any particular environment. I am not on the, I'm not advocating, and I don't advocate for authenticity in like a forced nature where we're forcing people to disclose parts of themselves in their lives that they don't wish to, but very much to the extent that people wish to is a really wonderful way of attracting diverse talent and making sure that they are included and treated equitably, because there's no point in trying to attract diverse talent and nurturing them to keep them in your organization and make your organization more innovative if they're just going to leave because they had a horrible experience and were treated badly or discriminated against, or like that's just, this just doesn't, it's a lose situation for literally everyone. So in religion, with bringing it into DI, what you want to do is set clear boundaries around what is appropriate to bring up regarding religious identity and what is not. So this can include, but it's not limited to, accommodating requests for time off for religious holidays or moving meetings or events that take place on holidays. So the goal is not to, oh, well, you can just leave if we have this important meeting on your religious holiday, but then that person misses out on the opportunity to participate in something that could be very instrumental in their career in the long term. So making sure that it's not just, oh, you're excused, but we're just going to keep going on. It's making sure that you're not scheduling events, meetings, things that are really going to be important for your staff to attend, whether professionally or like for their client work, their projects on their religious holidays. Just as, you know, a personal note, for Muslims, Ramadan, the month of Ramadan is coming up. So part of that would be making sure that the holiday at the end of Ramadan is called Eid al-Fitr, making sure that you aren't putting like a major event or meetings on that day, or when we presume that day is going to be, because we don't know completely what day it is this far in advance, but that is a conversation for a later time. So more of what religion is accommodating dietary restrictions, recognizing religious identity as compared, again, like our definition, why I go through DEI, the definitions again so strongly at the beginning, is making sure that we're not ignoring it, we're not erasing it, we're not forcing people to assimilate, whether explicitly or implicitly communicating that that's what we want of them. So making sure that we recognize religious identity, check our interpersonal biases that equate religion with only negative things. There are many folks who do have these biases towards religious identity, that someone who chooses to be part of a religion is anti-critical thinking, or that they are pro-oppression because they've seen a number of articles in the news, even over a period of years, yes, where the only time they hear about this one or couple religious groups is when something negative has happened. And of course, if we understand media literacy, we know that the news is meant to show the shocking and the absurd so that they can get eyeballs on their content. And then lastly, proactively prevent religious-based discrimination through clear company policies around both reporting and enforcement. As we know, even if someone reports a case of discrimination, it really doesn't mean anything for that employee to feel defended and that their organization has their back if there's no enforcement. Like, great, I stuck my neck out to say that there was something wrong. I've now, raised my head up for people to know that something is happening around my religious identity, which is incredibly personal. And it could be very difficult to experience discrimination based off of any identity. But then if your organization doesn't do anything about it, then that's very much going to break trust and affect your relationship, your employees' relationship with your organization. What religion in DI is not is very important to be clear. You need to set boundaries around that, including but not limited to, it is absolutely not appropriate to be bringing religious literature to work to pass out. If someone is bringing, a book, one of their religious texts to keep in their desk, to read on their break, to, reflect on, to just have as a reminder of their religious values, but it's, kept private, that is completely different than bringing like pamphlets or bringing books out. Even, yes, Muslims, I as a Muslim would tell other Muslims that it is not appropriate, for instance, to bring Qurans to their workplace and pass them out as materials. Making space for claims that one's religious beliefs justifies intolerance or bigotry, that is never acceptable. And yours, religious beliefs does not justify that in any way. Favoring some religions over others, forcing staff to participate in educational, cultural events around religion. So this is paying respect to those who are atheists, agnostic, people who don't identify with any spiritual or religious practice, or those who have experienced religious trauma, who we would never, ever, ever, never want to trigger or cause harm to them by having to listen to conversations around religious identity. And then secularizing, and then the goal absolutely is not to secularize everything so as not to engage with religious identity at all. This would be kind of the religious equivalent of like colorblind racism, with colorblind racism being like, oh, I don't see race, we're all just one, the human race. And so therefore I'm not going to acknowledge racism or colorism or anything related to discrimination related to that. That absolutely is not the goal in relation to race and racism, and completely secularizing everything in order to just not have to engage with religious identity is absolutely not the goal either. This is a quote from the author of White Christian Privilege, which I highly recommend checking out, Dr. Khyati Joshi. In most places, the response to more religious diversity has been less religion. That is, to restrict words and activities that acknowledge any religion. That approach hasn't gotten us anywhere. It's upset some religious communities, particularly Christians, without making other groups feel any less excluded. And for religious minorities, the message is still, you are invisible and you don't really matter. Please keep your identities, your religious identity, this huge part of who you are, please keep that to yourself. We don't care about it, and we don't want to see that part of you. I think for time, I'm going to have to skip this part, but please feel free. You all have my name. You can reach out to me. My email is hello@recommending.com, or you can reach out to me on my contact form on my website, and I'm more than happy to send you this slide deck. But in the meantime, so I'm going to skip this part. Essentially the purpose of cultural competency and cultural humility is that, on one hand, with cultural competency, do try to learn about other groups, while also having the humility to ask when you need help, and not pretending that you can just know everything. It's impossible for any of us, all of us in the world. It is impossible for us to know all the things about all the different identity groups, about all different subjects. That's just not possible, and that's not the point of any of this. Yes, it's good to continuously learn about new groups, about people that you haven't met, amazing, but also making sure that we stay humble, that we don't know all of the things. Moving to our last section, letting people tell you what it is that they need. Because in many instances, it is outright illegal to collect data around religious affiliation, and at best, individuals in the organization may feel extremely hesitant to share this information, and very rightly so, because there are many biases that exist around religion overall, just as like someone choosing to be a part of any religious community, or particular religious communities, including, obviously, as a Muslim, I'm very aware of like Islamophobia and the biases that exist around Muslims. If a Muslim woman wears hijab, there's even more specific biases that they might have. So your organization might very well not ever be able to actually collect data to know who are the religious groups that you have represented in your employee community. So what is it that you can do? What I teach in my trainings and in my work is to emphasize that your organization puts out information to your employees for them to then approach you with feedback. So emphasizing to your employees in different parts of your communications with them that your organization welcomes feedback. You have to actually welcome feedback, though. You can't just say that you welcome feedback and then not. So that's a whole other conversation around feedback. But your organization has to welcome feedback on how to be more inclusive, and be sure to mention religious accommodations specifically, because a lot of the times people of different religious identities will think, oh, you mean race, or you mean sexual orientation, or you mean disability, which again, those identities are very important and they deserve time and attention and should be included. And also, so should religious identity. So making sure that you include religious accommodations in your outreach about welcoming feedback. You can share this emphasis on welcoming feedback in your employee handbook, during new employee onboarding, all hands meetings, annual staff trainings, whether virtual or in person, your company intranet site, or Slack or Microsoft Teams, whatever combination of one or multiple that you may use. And then, of course, training your managers to proactively check in with their direct reports and having an established relationship with them of trust and respect. When the focus is on allowing your people to share what their needs are by providing feedback, this ensures, one, like you don't get in any trouble about collecting religious identity statistics or data, which definitely don't want to get anyone in trouble with that. But also, you don't pre-plan accommodations that aren't actually desired and helpful by different people, keeping in mind that no religious community, no identity group at all, whether religious or not, is a monolith. And there are going to be people within a group, like for instance, with Ramadan coming up, there are a lot of different amazing resources out there, articles, posts from different Muslims talking about how their organizations can be inclusive of Muslim staff, college students, community members, and so on. However, it's really important to keep in mind that there are going to be some Muslims who do desire certain accommodations, and there are going to be other Muslims who absolutely don't care or don't find that the same accommodation helpful. So making sure that you're checking in with your people to figure out what actually is going to be helpful for them, and don't waste your time and resources pre-planning accommodations that aren't actually desired. Making sure that you're not acting on generalizations that may be true for some, but not everyone. When well done, this nurtures a co-created culture of inclusion, respect, and trust, which Who is not going to love that? And it does not put anyone in a position to disclose information about themselves that they don't wish to, which again, a lot of folks of different religious identities will keep their religious identity to themselves. So what we've covered today is what religion is and what it is not. Obviously, we recapped diversity, equity, inclusion terms and intersectionality, religious cultural competency and cultural humility, and letting people tell you what they need. If you want to take a screenshot of this picture really quickly, I highly recommend doing so. These are some additional recommended resources, or again, if you reach out to me, my email is hello@rahimeramazani.com. That's my name. I'm sorry. Yes, you will have to spell it correctly, but it's on this workshop's material, so you should be able to find the spelling of my name. Or also, if you just go to my website, rahimeramazani.com, and go to the contact form, I'm more than happy if you reach out to me on the contact form to send you this slide deck. But these are some excellent resources, just a few sampling of them that I recommend. And I see that I have a couple of questions in the chat. I have all of 1 minute. Is it possible for me to quickly take like one question, Hunter?
If you can do it in 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay,
yeah.
okay. Let me see. So let's see. Are good examples of policy. Should corporate holiday calendars reflect religious? Yes. Should corporate holiday calendars reflect religious holidays? Absolutely. Yes, they should for sure. Not automatically have days off. Yeah. So you don't need to like give everyone, your whole organization, days off for everyone else's holidays. Not at all. I think I'm at time. There are so many calendars. You don't need to create your own holiday interfaith calendar. There's so many out there. Please don't spend time reinventing the wheel, but please just do check and making sure that, like, especially as an example for Muslims, getting time off for Eid al-Fitr. There's so many Muslims that I hear about who, even when they follow company policies and put in requests weeks in advance, asking for time off, they still aren't giving it off. And that's just completely unacceptable. Of course, there are many other religions that also their adherents should be able to get time off. That's just an example for my own identity. So that's, I'm sorry, all the time I have for that 1 minute. Thank you all so much for having me. I hope this was helpful in some way. But please feel free to reach out to me. Again, honestly, I don't think there's another Rahime Ramazani in the world. I'm just so special. But if you Google me, you will find how to contact me. So please do so if you have any questions or would like to work together. And with that, I will pass the mic.
Thank you so much, Rahime, and thank you for that masterclass. Thank you for the symbolic hair flips. I appreciate you for making the time. Thank you so much, and we hope to have you back.